This is Hello, everyone. This is Marilyn Turkovich, the Executive Director of the Charter for Compassion. And this is our June Global Read. And as you know, we have them each month. And in June, we are thrilled to have with us Marilyn Hamilton, who has been so involved in helping cities look at themselves and almost looking at them as the way that we look at human beings and the way that we function and thrive. But in this case, looking as the subtitle of the book implies, the human hive, designing impact. And many of you know that the Charter for Compassion really has two major objectives. One is to work with cities to have conversations about their deepest concerns and needs, and to involve people in remedying what they have in their locale. The second thing is that we look seriously at how we can bring education programming to our membership and beyond. And so the Global Read is one of the ways that we do that. And as I said, we are thrilled to have Marilyn with us. The other person that we have today with us is Sue Cooper. And Sue Cooper has become a real friend of the Charter for Compassion. She's a facilitator, a mindfulness teacher, and just an incredible organizer in her own right. And so I'm going to take a step back and allow Sue to introduce Marilyn and to help facilitate the exchange of conversation. If you have questions, reflections, please put them in the chat and I'll share those with Sue and with Marilyn, and very possibly we'll have an opportunity to answer those questions. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Sue.
Thank you, Marilyn T. Yes, I am enamoured by the Charter for Compassion and the work they do. And it's with the greatest of delight that I've been invited by Marilyn Hamilton to introduce her on this global read today. So, I'm a graduate from the Integral City Beyond Resilience course. So it's a great delight to introduce you to Dr. Marilyn Hamilton, founder of Integral City Meshworks and the author of the Integral City book series. She's the author of Tales of the CROFT Regeneration Novella series. She's a co-designer of the course Cities Rising for Regenerative World and curator of Urban Hub 20, City Change in a VUCA World, which is in English and in Spanish. Marilyn serves cities and eco-regions as Gaia's reflective organs. Inspired by the Master Code of Care for Self, Others, Place and Planet, she serves Ubiquity University as co-designer of the Master of Regenerative Action degree. She is or was CEO, COO, CFO, and CIO in the private and not-for-profit sectors. She's a researcher and a member of the Integral European Academic Consortium and Global Accreditation Council. She's a Findhorn Fellow and Urban Arena Europe Fellow and Ambassador for World Unity Week. Marilyn is an evolutionary leader, an international keynote speaker, and faculty of Ubiquity University and Royal Roads University School of Leadership for 20 years plus several other universities. Marilyn designs, delivers, and supervises academic courses. These build capacity for the well-being of 4 archetypal voices of the city: the citizens, civic managers, business/innovators, and third sector/civil society. She's worked and travelled internationally in many countries, cities, and organisations in most sectors. Currently, Marilyn is really passionate about creating city regeneration hubs and cities of peace, as initiatives of a new international consortium called Living Cities, Earth, aimed at igniting aliveness in 10,000 cities, reconnecting them to our living Earth. Marilyn lives in Findhorn Eco-Village in Scotland, where she returned to the land of her ancestors from British Columbia, Canada, in 2018. Marilyn's website, which I'll pop in the chat, is integralcity.com. So Marilyn, I'd love to hand this over to you now and look forward to hearing from the beauty of your work and then for enjoying a conversation afterwards. So over to you.
Thank you, Sue, for that very full introduction. I really appreciate your appreciation of the course that you have graduated from. And I see one other graduate in our audience today, Amanda Faulkner. So welcome especially to her as well. And for those of you who will discover that in the future, I can't say that I would be more proud to recommend the course than through these two people, Sue Cooper and Amanda Faulkner, who are really doing work that inspires me. I just returned today to come back to Findhorn to do the podcast today with you for Global Reads from, as Sue was saying, from a group that is internationally gathered in Amsterdam. And I want to just start today in a way that's quite simple. I will read to you from the third book of my series of books, but I'm going to start you with a reading from the second book. The second book is really focusing on inquiry and action and designing impact for the human hive. But what I want to start you with is something that the group who was gathered internationally came to appreciate as starting with a ritual. We would start with a ritual of attunement to spirit. But today I want to go even a little bit further and give you an actual meditation. So I'm just going to invite you to get comfortable where you are. Now, close your eyes and get present in your room. Take a deep breath and clear away as much of your mental chatter as you can. Find yourself in your body and feel the sensation of sitting in your chair. Look for and find the center of your being. And when you feel centered, look around in your mind's eye. Who else might be here with you? Who do you even imagine is joining us from far and wide in this way of connecting? Recognize us as a nested group within the larger collective of others, other people, other groups. Notice what you notice and just let it go. Just see if you can connect with everyone you imagine is in our electronic room by noticing them. And now see if you sense the center of our collective of individuals. Does it have a center in the location of our Zoom room? Just notice what you notice quietly and let it go. And now bring your awareness to the building in which you're located. Sense into the boundaries created by the walls. Locate yourself in relationship to the walls of your room, including the ceiling, the floor, and the doors. And then expand your awareness to the whole building envelope itself, imagining the room inside the building. Then imagine your building as it sits in its streetscape or landscape. And now practice expanding your awareness to the city or your human habitat, whether that's a town or a village or a city of any size. Imagine the street as it rises from land within the boundaries which contain your human habitat, whatever its name. Just whisper that name to yourself now. And it's time to pull your awareness higher, imagining your place as part of the county or region, and the county or region as part of the ecoregion, and the ecoregion as a node in the network of ecoregions across the planet, where cities create hubs of human habitats in every nation on 6 continents. Be aware that this group includes integral city practitioners who are present with us and working the space from nodes in other places like Edmonton or Victoria or Seattle or Nottinghamshire or Knaresborough or Amsterdam or India. And as you become aware that we are all gathered in this special place, notice that we're serving the spirit of a planet of cities as potential arising from each of these cities. We're calling forth what is by giving voice to the nested places where we are embedded, by interacting with others who are in this electronic room with us, or even in our real rooms, by caring about the experience we each have as we play with awareness of self, others, places, and planet, and rest in the care of the planet as she cares for us. Thank you. And when you feel ready, take a breath and just return your awareness to your room. So this is a meditation that I actually use in the training programs that we do for Integral City. Sue mentioned the one about Beyond Resilient. We also have another one called Beyond Smart, and also working with regeneration hubs. And what I wanted to do today was to choose something that was a gentle bridge from this meditation into something that I think is at the core of how I think about integral cities. What does this word integral mean? It really means just a whole city, looking at all of the ways that we can imagine a city has life in it. It's about its aliveness. It's also about how we care for one another. As I said at the end of the meditation, caring for self, others, place, and planet is integral to the way that I think about the city as a living, evolutionary whole system. I think it's the most complex system that humans have yet created. And I want to read to you the chapter today from the 3rd book in my series. I call it Integral City 3.7, Reframing Complex Challenges for Gaia's Human Hives. What does 3.7 mean? Well, I was thinking it's the 3rd book, so there's the 3. But the 7 actually means unto the 7th generation. So I always dedicate my books unto the 7th generation, and that is something that I've learned from the indigenous peoples, that when we want to make decisions that are aligned and coherent with life, it is really valuable to try and think as far ahead as the 7th generation from now. And that will give us, hopefully, the wisdom to be able to make decisions that are full of life. So this chapter is called The Master Code of Care for Individual, Collective, and City Well-Being. So let me start on page 55, if anybody has the book. And I start by telling you the story of when I was writing the first book, which is called Integral City Evolutionary Intelligences for the Human Hive. So thinking about the city as a living system, I often refer to it as a human hive, like a beehive is to bees, human hive is to humans. When I had written that series, I had explored all the intelligences, including the evolutionary intelligences. And in fact, when I landed on that, when I came to write this final chapter in book 1, I realized that the 12 intelligences evolved from a master code that governed the human hive. According to an urban myth, the essentials of this code had been discovered at the neighborhood scale in a public school, where the principal announced to the teachers, administration, and students on the first day that the way the school would be managed would be that everyone would follow 3 rules. The rules were to take care of individual selves, take care of each other, and take care of this place. I don't know if that story came originally from New Zealand or America or Canada. I've heard versions from all of those places. However, when I thought about that code, I realized, especially with the addition of the planetary scale, which came to me, that it was a fractal intelligence of a species DNA, and also a meta-intelligence that guided our well-being on all scales, from individual to group to city to planet. Then when I was writing book 2 in the Integral series that I just read the meditation from, embracing the master code became a key section. I write about it in that book through 2 chapters. And that book is split into 2 sections. One is called Place Caring, and that is the part where we include the practices of the master code. And we realized that practicing the master code expands our circles of care. And in exploring the master code, I have often repeated the question many people ask me, well, what can our cities do for us? And this inquiry inspired my organization, Integral City Meshworks, back in September 2012. It's hard to believe that's 10 years ago, to launch a month-long action inquiry about how the 12 intelligences of an integral city could help us develop a new operating system for the city. We called it Integral City 2.0, for the purpose of the city doing more for us. We brought together 60 Integral City pioneers, 3 to 5 for each of the 12 Integral City intelligences. Each spoke of the value of that particular intelligence to the city. Thought leaders explored with us, well, what is this intelligence? Then designers framed for us, so what is important about incorporating this intelligence into city life? And then practitioners told us, now what can we do with this intelligence when we implement it in service to the well-being of the human hive? We used a methodology that was built on the DNA of the master code of the human hive, as stated earlier. It was critical to hear from as many of the 4 voices as possible in the city. And Sue had identified the 4 voices when she was introducing me. These 4 voices of the city were introduced in book 1, and they also became very much a part of the efficacy that we were trying to promote in book 2. What they do is they represent core roles that enable the well-being of the human hive. They are kind of archetypal. The first one is the citizens. The second one is civil society, or third sector as it's known in Europe. The second one is civil society. The third one is civic managers, that is the city government and institutions. And the fourth one is business organizations and innovators. So the power of bringing together our city pioneers and our city voices produced an exponential learning, I would say, blast. It was like an explosion of we power that is still circling the earth like volcanic emissions. This kind of blast cast a radically optimistic outfall of evolutionary patterns across our planet of cities. Our conference started with a passionate question. How can we design a new operating system for the city that allows us to thrive, to be fully human? And incidentally, that conference is fully documented as a report, and it covers over 600 pages because it was a month-long webinar. At that time, we actually didn't have Zoom available to us. It was a pre-Zoom time, but it is documented and accessible. And why was that question that we asked, how can we design a new operating system for the city that allows us to thrive? Why was it so important to us? I believe it was because we cared so much about life that we could bring our individual intelligences to bear on how to add value to it. But when we asked this question in the company of others, it also assumed that collectively we care enough about life that we can bring our collective intelligence to bear on how to add value to it. Here was the trick we discovered. We found in our inquiry that humans can be both as caring and intelligent for ourselves as for our species and all life on Earth. But paradoxically, we discovered that we can only realize this possibility if we all have a chance to experience that caring. In Africa, they have an expression for this. They call it Ubuntu. I am because you are. So if we are not just to survive, but thrive, we must wake up at scale, grow up as activators of city change, goal up, and whole up. This means we take responsibility on all 4 scales for the Master Code. Just as the apocryphal principal who set out the code of conduct for his school, we found it to be an equally simple and powerful code of conduct for enabling a thriving city. Thus, we have come to claim it as the Master Code of Care for the human hive. And sometimes I would put a little footnote here. Sue calls it the Mother Code of Care. The paradoxical and powerful qualities about this Master Code lead us to explore how to practice on a regular basis through meditation, through inquiry, through action, and through impact. Most of us are too busy just living our lives to observe how a practice which commits us to a sustained or regular activity can instill a new habit. But paying attention to what we care about is one of the first practices worth engaging in. We've discovered that beyond the first level of discovery, there is a second level of mastery to the Master Code. It lies in the power of practicing each level of the code to expand a related circle of care. Each level is more complex than the one before. This means that as we learn to practice the basics of taking care of ourselves, then a surprising thing happens. We develop the capacity to take care of each other. And when we learn well how to take care of each other on different scales, from family to tribe to organization to sector to community to city and nation, then we develop even more capacity to take care of this place or city. And when we learn to take care of our place or places, since there's many people on this call, whether that is our home, apartment, or house, our workplace, our neighborhood, or our city, then we can learn to take care of our ecoregion and our planet. Thus, as the scale of the place increases, so do our circles of care. Finally, we realize that all the elements of the Master Code, take care of yourself, take care of others, take care of this place, take care of this planet, are not really separate from each other. They are not in conflict with one another. In fact, we can acknowledge each element as the same command at different levels of scale. And each of these elements of the Master Code surpasses and includes one another in a kind of graceful developmental sequence. So we think there is a deep intelligence in this Master Code. When we discovered the transpersonal power of the Master Code, we came to appreciate how this code gave rise to the 12 intelligences in the city. In turn, we came to recognize how the Master Code synthesizes the principles of living systems. We could also link the Master Code to the relationship of the 4 voices of the city to each other and to the human hive as they serve it. And we set out the story of this in one of the appendices of the book. This is why we explored with conference members back in 2012 their relationship to the voices and their cities of interest. We asked, how do you see yourself in relation to the city? Which voice is the one you express most often when you are in the city? Maybe you express more than one of these voices. And when you choose one, think about the opportunities that you have to contribute to the intelligence of the city, no matter whether the one you choose is citizen, or civil society, or civic manager, or business innovator. I'll just let you pause for a moment here and say, which of those hats are you wearing? Maybe you've got more than one on today. And maybe when you're doing different things during the day, you take one hat off and put another on. And sometimes they'll all be stacked together. From these simple questions and the responses shared by conference participants in 2012, we came to realize how the circles of care arising through each voice became an expression of one or more integral city intelligences that focused the master code on the city in a particular way. Furthermore, when we stood back and took a meta view of the interaction of the integral city intelligences and the master code at the three scales internally within the city, that is self, others, and place, we could hear a fifth voice, which was the external exchange between cities. We recognized this fifth voice was often manifested as a competitive voice in the modern and postmodern eras of industrial development and early globalization, and even a combative voice in pre-modern cities, something that is still alive in intercity sports tournaments, and as a voice that connects the cities to the land in traditional and indigenous eras. But as the four internal city voices reached out beyond their own cities, first to the regions with which they traded, and then to the ecological regions that supported their environmental footprint, this fifth voice of the intercity exchanges moved beyond combat and competition into early forms of collaboration and, in some cases, coordination. The evolution of the fifth voice made possible the emergence of the fourth scale of the complexity for cities, namely to see themselves not just as individual or even regional entities, but as a planet of cities who could thrive more by working together than standing apart. Ultimately, our planet of cities is evolving together as we practice the integral city intelligences that inevitably expands our circles of care to the scale of the planet of cities. This is how I believe our cities are evolving into what James Lovelock recognized as Gaia's reflective organ. James Lovelock was the physicist who basically proposed that Gaia herself, our Earth, our planet, is a living system. So if Gaia's reflective organs is what James Lovelock thinks that humans are, I think that ultimately our cities are evolving Gaia's reflective organ systems. In working with different cities, we've come to see that the four voices demonstrate integral city intelligences at all four levels of expression of the master code. And if you read the book in this chapter, I have several pages that give specific examples of how the intelligences and these four voices work together. But for today, I'm just going to tell you that, and I'm going to move on beyond that section and just tell you a little bit more about growing caring capacity. As we contemplated the power of the master code and how cities who develop their caring capacity for self, others, place, and planet are cities who also develop their carrying capacity. In other words, their resilience for good times and bad. Communities and cities who care have the capacity to rapidly respond and evolve into new ways of being and becoming together. Research is showing that caring is core to the building of trust across the multiple scales of human systems and impacts this capacity to collaborate and generate impact. This is frequently evidenced as a shared intelligence when people respond with magnificent acts of generosity and capability in times of crisis. Like I have some examples here from when I wrote the book, and its updated edition, I was thinking of Hurricane Harvey in 2017, or Fort McMurray fires in Canada in 2016, or Gander, Newfoundland, when the planes all landed as a result of the World Trade Center strike in 2001. All of those are extraordinary cities, extraordinary examples of cities who reached out and expanded their capacity for care, and their own carrying capacity was extended to others. When we connected those intelligences together in our 1-month intensive online conference, we could see that if you want to move beyond just the survivability of your city and improve the thrivability of your city, these 12 intelligences amplify city carrying capacity. We could hear resonance to the master code through the 60 voices of experts, designers, and practitioners, all leaders who revealed the city as the human hive, and the 600 people who joined the conference. Their stories affirmed that the natural power of the master code enabled daily life and local and global well-being that emerged from demonstrating care for self, care for others, care for this place, and care for this planet. So I want to move us into our next consideration of living the master code and how that relates to producing a happiness and well-being. We further come to appreciate that the outcome of living the master code produces a critical indicator of success, namely happiness. Happiness is something that we write about in regard to sharing the intelligence of a happiness factor, and I even have an algorithm for that, which I'll save for another discussion. But I want to tell you a little bit about the background of the happiness research, because we took special care as a result of this discovery to link the kind of happiness that emerges from the master code from perhaps some of the more general or less deep approaches to happiness. So here's just a quotation from one of the reports that have been written about us that we've contributed to. Happiness studies have produced early evidence for the well-being of individuals, cities, cultures, and nations. This kind of happiness is not merely ego or self-centered, nor is it ethno or regional centered, nor even merely place or planet centered. Instead, this indicator integrates all the scales of possible happiness that arise when our decision sets are aligned. This happens when we live the master code, choosing to take care of ourselves, each other, cities, and the planet all at once, simultaneously, an opportunity we've never before experienced in history. Happiness measures the right relationship between caring capacity in the left-hand quadrants of the integral model and carrying capacity in the right-hand quadrants, coexisting and co-emerging at the city scale, like the double helix of emergent cyclical human development that Claire Graves proposed for the individual scale. This is a special reference to people who know spiral dynamics. Thus, happiness as an evolutionary alignment index of caring and carrying capacities supplies the double well-being feedback loop for sustainability and resilience, which I believe the bees use. We must learn to notice when our beings are depressed, indicating we are unhappy, misaligned, underperforming, and poorly rewarded, and what we must do to steward the right relationship of all life in our cities, ecoregions, and the planet. So that's the end of the quotation from the research section. Happiness has been studied for its characteristics, subjective qualities, and desirability as a state. Happiness has been declared a right and a responsibility, both of which we agree it entails. But the Master Code shows that happiness goes beyond rights and responsibilities to include results and ratios. Frederick Laloux found that at the organizational scale, complex organizations like FAVI and Zappos realized that there was no performance without happiness. Happiness is a result of taking care of self, others, place, and planet in a way that these systems can survive, connect with one another, and regenerate, basically embracing the basic qualities of a living system. As one expands the circles of care in living the master code, happiness naturally expands. In this way, the right to happiness emerges from living. The right to happiness emerges from living, and the responsibility for happiness arises from caring for others, place, and planet. These responsibilities then open up as a set of happiness ratios, which I will save for another time. Ultimately, happiness measures the right relationship between caring capacity, the combined effect of our consciousness and culture for self, others, place, and planet, and carrying capacity, the combined effects of our behaviors and systems as self, other, place, and planet. Thus, living the master code produces happiness that is measurable in terms of sustainability and resilience in all four quadrants. Happiness is like the 20 kilos of honey produced by the bees. Happiness supplies the double feedback loop that aligns the effectiveness or sweet spot of living the master code, so that well-being in the human hive results at ego, ethno, regional, and planetary scales. Happiness is the ultimate measure of the experience of our aliveness in living the master code in all four quadrants of our creative existence. And so that brings me now to our conclusion. The rewards of living the master code are multifold. They tie together in a sacred embrace the power of spirituality and the aliveness of creativity. We have proposed 4 rewards as follows. First, we create a new level of ourselves as caring individuals. Secondly, we augment our capacity to make a positive difference in the world as groups of others together. Thirdly, we become part of a vibrant community of mutually supportive relationships in our city by connecting to people who care. And fourthly, we release the DNA of our master code in our cities as a contribution to the well-being of all the cities of our planet of cities. So those 4 values from the master code were spelled out in our earlier book, in the second book, but here in this third book, we also add to these 4 more benefits. So the 5th one is, we discover the secret to happiness as an ever-evolving condition that is impacted by circles of care, creativity, and evolutionary complexity. 6, we strengthen our intelligences as a human hive when the master code amplifies spirituality and creativity, thus enabling both sustainability and resilience, also known as thrivability. 7, we come to trust the universe as a caring source and ourselves as caring resources whose spiritual energy is refreshed and renewed in a living system embrace. And 8th, we gain an appreciation for the deep role of caring in all acts of creativity. Finally, by living the master code, we may learn the vital importance of what we discovered in our online conference. The role of cities in the evolution of humans to become Gaia's reflective organs and an organ system for the whole planet is critical. Therefore, we should ask both, what can our cities do for us, as well as what can we do for our cities? And we should go even one step further and ask, what can we do for our planet? Because our very survival is symbolically enmeshed in all 4 elements of the master code of care. Thank you. And that's the end of this chapter, Sue.
Marilyn, thank you so much. I've just sat here and just immersed myself in the author of such an incredible work, sharing it vocally with us. So a huge thank you. And I wonder if this feels okay to just take a moment, because there was so much care and consideration shared within the essence and the words that you've shared. Shall we just take a moment and reflect on there's the 3 questions that you asked at the end. Maybe that's something we each want to reflect on individually, and maybe that arises more questions from an individual perspective and a collective perspective. Does that sound okay to you, Marilyn?
Beautiful. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if we can just for a moment embed quite a lot of the research here and the beauty that's been shared. And I suggest that we simply close our eyes or soften our gaze as we started at the beginning, bringing ourselves into the center of our being, literally being present with our whole self, but finding the center, as Marilyn led us at the very beginning, the center of our individual place within our room and within our planet. But let's just move into our individual center. Let's take a breath. Let's settle down the mind and embed the beauty. So I invite us each to take a conscious breath. Conscious breath in and out. Maybe a deep breath in and a slow breath out. And as we do this, we become present of the breath, and we automatically bring ourselves into the present moment. And the 3 questions are: what can our cities do for us? What can our cities do for us? Maybe what can my city do for me? And then the next question is, what can I do for my city? Or what can we do for our cities? And then letting that go, just planting these seeds into this heart of compassion. The 3rd question is, what can we do for our planet as a collective? What can we do for our planet? So with those seeds planted into the center of our being, let's take one more breath. Deep in, slow out. And maybe with a smile. And then we open our eyes. And with this immense sense of gratitude, this is a wonderful time to open into questions and conversation. And if I may, as I have the mic, as you were doing this beautiful meditation, Marilyn, at the very beginning, from book 2, and it's page 37, just before there's a little endnote which has struck me immensely, which you talk about the overview effect. And I know you haven't actually brought this into being, but implicitly it's within all your work. And if I may read this, the overview effect is a phenomenon noticed by astronauts looking back on planet Earth from space, realizing that they were seeing the whole of an overview that caused a psychoactive impact. We have the same opportunity to see our cities from away, not only as an aerospace voyager, but also as a boat navigator, a train rider, or an auto passenger. And from the 4 master or mother codes of care, forgive me, because the very nature of care is nurturing, and the wholeness of the potential psycho impact of us all awakening. This is part of what you were talking about, waking up and growing up and moving into wholeness. The impact of that is actually potentially very profound for us all, and this co-creating these compassionate communities, which you're doing so beautifully and guiding us in this. I just wondered if you had a few words to say about a kind of the potential of this mass awakening which is underway, and the work that you're doing within cities.
Yes, it's a beautiful question. Thank you, Sue. And thanks for noticing the little footnote about the overview effect, because it gives us kind of a way to context the whole multiple dynamics of the city. So what I see happening around the world is that cities are awakening because in many respects they have no choice right now. They've been I think every city in the world has been shocked into waking up in a different way. First of all, some individuals within cities were noticing the climate change. And if you were in a city that just got flooded or had a heat wave go on for weeks at a time in the 40-degree plus mark, or you had other indications that climate change was not a theory anymore, but was actually directly impacting. And then you woke up one morning and you heard this news broadcast about the pandemic, and you realized there was something called a lockdown, that everybody was going to have to really isolate themselves from one another. And then we've gone on to have recurring other large challenges that impact our food supply, our energy supply, and of course, in this year, the terrible reoccurrence of war in Europe. And that war is not the only war in the world. A lot of people don't realize there's something like 256 wars going on concurrently around the world. So, cities are where people naturally congregate and live as wholes. So many of the people who study how humans learn would point to something that I see even in the chat, that dissonance is often what causes us to find a new way to do something, be something, connect with something. So we've had to learn, because we've had no choice when we look at these large planetary scale challenges now. We have also daily challenges that impact individuals, and organizational challenges that impact supply chains because of all of these other planetary disconnections. And we also have eco-regional challenges because our cities are realizing that they don't live in islands on their own, but are interconnected with one another. So I think that the waking up has been something that we didn't necessarily imagine would happen in such a short period of time. If you look at the people who have studied any of these particular challenges, they have all been predicting sooner rather than later we would have to contend with them. But very few of them realized that there would be, what we often use the expression, a perfect storm of all of them together. And now we have all of them together. So I think that what we've noticed as we've been in cities through these different predicaments is that people have a natural caring capacity that causes them to reach out to one another, to be in neighborhoods together, and that they've not been able to depend on the government or what other structures or systems have supported them, and have had to do everything from growing their own food to cleaning their own water to resourcing different ways to support one another in illness because of the pandemic, that kind of thing, or rescuing one another because of the cataclysmic climate challenges that are faced. So I think the waking up is causing us to grow up very quickly. And that means that I think as we realize that these situations are not going to go away, we will have to become even more wise, even more knowledgeable about how to grow up. And as you pointed out, the next stages will set out goals, and they will also set out ways for us to clean up as well, to look into the shadows that have precipitated many of these dissonances, and become much more aware that we can whole up. So those stages of waking up and growing up and cleaning up and holding up are looking at it from a city scale, but it actually applies to every one of the fractal scales that I spoke about: individuals, organizations, communities, the whole cities, the planet. Yeah.
Yes, as you say, the storm. It's phenomenal, isn't it? And there's so many of us who've actually been preparing ourselves, caring for ourselves already, and then of course caring for others. And this is what I love so much about your work and the Charter for Compassion, because you mentioned about the possibility of about Ubuntu. I am because you are, which reflects the golden rule, doesn't it, of the Charter for Compassion: treat others as one wants to be treated. So the question that is arising, Marilyn Turkovich has popped it in the chat, is how does an integral community help ignite happiness in the community?
Well, I believe it is through caring. So a lot of people, think that they need to go shopping to get happy. Or create a delicious meal to be happy, or to go for a walk in nature to be happy. All of those do generate happiness for a short period of time. And I call that sort of a daily happiness, or I'm measuring it. I think it's different than what I'm proposing is a deep happiness. Deep happiness arises when we can practice in our communities the care for self and others and our community. And there's wonderful feedback loops that occur that really expand our caring capacity psychologically, and that causes us to want to reach out to others. It's almost like an impulse. And as we do this more and more, we actually, in both the communities of care or communities of compassion, talk about expanding those circles. And as we do the practices, if we're practicing mindfulness like you do, Sue, it becomes noticeable that it expands our heart intelligence. But as we actually are practicing doing, the doing in itself causes our being, our awareness, our psychology to expand the care as well. So I talk about the relationship between caring and carrying capacity. And the carrying capacity has often been explored these days by environmentalists and people who are looking at how can we improve the sustainability of our cities. And they may be surprised that in this practice, they then also generated the consciousness and cultural caring that is expand as well. So this is one of the magics of the holding of consciousness, culture, actions, and systems. That's an integral approach. And we're always doing it. We're just not always aware of it. And we can, when we become aware of it, be much more intentional about it.
And thank you, Marilyn. And doing these practices actually just make you incredibly sensitive, doesn't it? And finding other people who have those sensitivities is about protecting your own compassionate heart, at the same time as finding others that you can share these deep knowings with. Which leads to a question that's in the chat by Kat Haber. How might we plan for multidimensional and multisensory approach to urban planning?
Well, one of the ways to think about the integral approach, the biopsychocultural social, is that is multidimensional on its own. And if we become conscious of our sensory input to it. It is also how we can expand it. So Sue, when you lead us in a meditation, you ask us to become aware of breath and then become aware of body. And I know in Findhorn here, when we're looking at attunements, we'll often take people an awareness right down through all of the senses. And by becoming aware of our senses and allowing for this overview of however we can see our immediate environment and city, and then sharing that, I think the sharing happens not only in the challenging situations I was speaking to, but also in things like dialogue. So a lot of people will practice dialogue circles as another way to become aware of how powerful we can be in being able to just listen to one another. So I think that multidimensionality comes through things that we often dismiss or don't care enough to really see the value of them. And listening would be very high on my list.
And I wonder about safe spaces within communities where, you know, within the urban planning, where we can actually come together and find each other. It's something that I call integrating holistic healing hubs, healing meaning self-regulation, the well-being hubs. How, do you see that these come a particular building? I mean, just before you answer that, I see it as a well-being centre. You know, we have a health centre, but usually they're for illnesses. It's more of an illness centre. And if only we could just go to one place. You turn left, and if you see the doctor, but if you turn right, you have the opportunity to be part of this preventative action of care individually and collectively.
Yes, I think, well, that's one of the ways I really admire your work, Sue. And, you know, when we think about how do we plan for multidimensional and multisensory approaches to urban planning, I think it's by invitation. So just inviting people to come together for very simple exploration of what's working around here, what's not working around here, what do we imagine could be better? And when we allow people to tell their stories, then we become aware that there's an energy for change. So the change comes not just from planning from top down, it actually comes from the heart out. And that way we're attracted and provide each other the support that is needed in order to go from where we are now to where we want to be.
Thank you. That is, I'm conscious of the time. That is a perfect. If I could just read out this in the chat for us now on the recording. Thank you. Imagining gleaming, energetic social spaces. I mean, the shiningness and the beauty of that is it's possible. There's enough of us doing this already, Marilyn, isn't there? You know, and different people on the call who are actually deeply committed to this this new paradigm, or one of, you know, where we come together as a collective.
Yes, I believe it is global, and many of us are just not aware of each other. And so that's part of the growing up and holding up, is becoming aware how much goodness is emerging out there.
Yeah, and there's a lot. Would you say there was a lot?
I would say there was a lot. And I believe in generally the positive and optimistic aspects of humankind. And I think that will be the impulse, the evolutionary impulse, the impulse of aliveness that is in us, that will take us from growing up to cleaning up to holding up.
And the knowledge that the earth is alive, Gaia is alive, is a living system, is a very important part. So thank you so much. And with that, thank you to Charter for Compassion and to Marilyn. And Marilyn, are there any last words at all from you?
I do have a few. Thank you so much, Marilyn. It's rare that one Marilyn gets to talk to another one. And so we often find ourselves on the same call. And so we are Marilyn H and Marilyn T. Thank you so much. I think that what has happened today is that I think more than an inspirational bridge, but a bridge that we have the power to build from the grassroots organizing of Saul Alinsky to the more spiritual and caring aspects of being a part of a compassionate city. So I am so grateful to this discussion today. And real quickly, want to invite you to next month's Global Read on the 13th. This is a little change for us because it's a book written by two adults, psychologists, for kids and for youth. And you can change your own life with Barbara Kerr, who actually was the person who started the Compassion Education Institute with us a number of years ago, and Dr. Barry Summer. And then as we move forward, and I'm hoping that I can, yeah, there we go. We also have started this year a film series. And so our July pick is Wisdom Weavers of the World. And like with all of our programs, you can just go to the front page of the Charter for Compassion and you'll be able to see our calendar events and learn a little bit more about how to register. Every first and third Thursdays of the month, we have something called the EdNet Forum. And coming up on July 7th is Dr. Lisa Miller, the author of Awakened Schools and Spirituality in Education. So we're very excited about that program. And then the Institute this month, starting at the end of the month, is the Compassionate Listening Circle. This is a training course, and it has been around for a number of years originally to help with dialogue in the Middle East, but it has grown globally. And we are very excited to be offering this course. It's a 4-week-long course. And again, if you go to the homepage of the Charter for Compassion and look under the different events, you'll see that it's listed there and you'll have a link to learn more about it. Thank you so very much to Marilyn Hamilton and definitely to Sue Cooper. And we hope that we'll see you in one of our other programs. Goodbye.